Welcome to this episode of Silicon Bites. And we're looking today at how Dima Medvedev is going off on one. Dima Medvedev is rattling the nuclear sabre again in a highly entertaining spat with Donald Trump, who in turn is calling the economies of Russia and India dead. What does all this rhetoric mean? Does it amount to little more than political theatre until Trump takes real measures to restrain Putin's war machine? Before we jump in, thank you to everybody who supports the channel through Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, everybody who is subscribed, and do please check you are subscribed. And if you're adding comments and sharing the videos around, then it's a huge help because it helps other people to discover the channel, these conversations, and the many interviews that we publish on a daily basis. Well, let's start. We unpack in this episode a startling clash: Dmitry Medvedev's nuclear threats and Donald Trump's sweeping dismissal of India and Russia as dead economies. The former probably was already on your bingo card, the latter possibly not. Well, what does this spat reveal? And will anything follow to curb Putin's war machine? The first part, Medvedev's nuclear threats return. Dmitry Medvedev, Putin's longtime loyalist, now serving as deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, has been resurrecting his role as hawk in chief. Over the last 3 years, he's issued more chilling warnings than I've had time to have hot dinners. As early as May 2024, he wrote, Russia regards all long-range weapons used by Ukraine as already being directly controlled by servicemen from NATO countries. This is no military assistance. This is participation in a war against us. That's quoted from the Financial Times. In late September 2024, he said, if Ukraine is allowed to use Western long-range missiles, we would reduce Kiev to a giant melted spot, reported in Politico. And in July 23, he said, Russia would have to use a nuclear weapon if a NATO-backed offensive regained Russian-occupied land. Wikipedia. Well, all these things happened and more. The long-range strike capabilities, the campaign to take actual Russian territory in Kursk, not just retake occupied territory, and the continued supply of munitions to Kiev by its allies, maybe not at the scale required, but substantial nonetheless. And Dimon's threats proved to be hollow, bloviating bluster. Most recently, in response to Trump's insults, Medvedev reminded him of Russia's dead hand system, an automated Cold War era failsafe, and he wrote, maybe he should recall his favorite movies about the walking dead and remember how dangerous the fabled dead hand could be. That is reported in the Hindustan Times, a paper which has a track record of amplifying and repeating Russian talking points and propaganda. Segment 2, Trump's dead economies and tariffs. On July 31st, 2025, Trump posted on Truth Social, I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We've done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way and tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory. Well, that is reported in many outlets, including the Economic Times. More bluster and political theatre? Well, certainly, but one phrase stands out. We almost do no business together. That's interesting. It seems that someone has injected some good information into Trump's head, because in January to June, the talk was all about the huge economic and business opportunities available from a reconciliation with Russia and a normalization of relations. These remarks followed Trump's executive order implementing a 25% tariff on India and additional penalties tied to its energy and defense links with Russia. He essentially linked trade policy to geopolitical alignment, says the Economic Times. Well, this has been a long time coming. Many Ukrainian lives could have been saved if it had been implemented earlier, including by Biden. But it's welcome nonetheless, and seems to have caught India off guard, which vowed to protect its farmers, exporters, and sovereignty. Domestic opposition in India erupted in outrage over Trump's dead economy labels. But in this case, I think he has a point. India's greedy thirst for Russia's blood oil has highlighted the lack of any moral concerns in the actions of that country's foreign policy. They're getting rich on the corpses of Ukrainians. But so are some European countries that continue to buy Russian oil and LNG and export military components and machine tools that end up in Russia building its war machine. So says the Economic Times. Part 3. Medvedev is Putin's lapdog, high rhetoric, low power. Despite the thunderous rhetoric, Medvedev's official role grants little independent authority. As deputy chairman of the Security Council since January 2020, he is subordinate to Putin. Analysts call him Putin's less evil twin turned arch hawk, a public mouthpiece meant to rally hardcore nationalism while shielding Putin from direct blame. Well, so says Wikipedia. But to call him a twin suggests more power and influence than he is likely to exert. In short, Medvedev's threats attract attention, but they're likely just symbolic. He has no command over Russia's nuclear forces and thus no unilateral ability to launch strikes. He has no standing with the army and no control over the rubber stamp parliament or the propagandists. No, Putin pulls all of these strings himself. Part 4. The verbal spat's significance. So why is Trump picking a fight with Medvedev? Analysts see this as a political calculus, targeting someone loud but hollow and largely irrelevant. According to Time, by attacking Medvedev rather than Putin directly, Trump maintains the illusion of toughness on Russia while keeping back-channel options open. So says Time. This also lets Trump project deterrence without committing to actual strategic consequences. Medvedev's invocation of the dead hand boosts his Cold War mystique, but in practice, it's political theatre reacting to threats to Russia's prestige, or as some speculate, Dima has just sobered up long enough momentarily to type something into Twitter and will then lapse back into his alcoholic torpor. Thanks, Dima, for your service. Now here's a bottle. Go relapse into inebriated and inconsequential oblivion. So what has Trump actually done to deter Russia in reality? Trump's aggressive Twitter diplomacy is striking, but policies behind the rhetoric are limited. He imposed tariffs on India tied to its defense and energy deals with Russia, threatening broader trade consequences, so says the Financial Times. He set a hard ceasefire ultimatum, 10 to 12 days for Russia to end its war in Ukraine or face sanctions on Russia and its oil buyers, according to Reuters. But who's to say that following this 10 days there will not be another 10 days and another and another? So far, there's no escalation of military support to Ukraine, no freezing of Russia's advanced weapons flow, no strengthening of NATO deterrence posture. It's mostly sanctions theatre without enforcement depth. And note it's indirect, hitting Putin's allies and not really touching Russia directly. I wonder why he'd take that approach, the slow and indirect. Well, Trump's tone towards Putin versus Medvedev is different, but his language towards Putin has cooled over the last couple of weeks. He once praised Putin lavishly, but his recent commentary avoids mentioning Putin personally. Meanwhile, Medvedev shoulders the brunt of Trump's insults. Failed former president was told to watch his words. This signals a strategic choice. Putin remains untouched publicly, while the orange blowtorch is focused on the loudmouth at the margins, Medvedev. It may reveal something about maintaining channels directed to Moscow, keeping those channels open to deals, or simply preserving some sense of intrigue. Putin isn't deterred, though, and his aggression is intensifying. Despite the rhetoric, Putin's aggression continues unabated. Russia's claimed to have taken Chasiv Yar in eastern Ukraine. It has also launched missile and drone strikes in increasing numbers and with greater lethality, killing civilians, 9 killed and over 100 injured in Kiev alone over the last day or so. Medvedev's nuclear threats escalate into deeper aggression, and there is no real deterrence power there. The Kremlin seems emboldened, perhaps even fueled by these hostile exchanges, as proof the West is panicking. which validates their current course rather than deters them. They are certainly showing no signs of being deterred by Trump's strategy. Quite the opposite. Putin seems to be provoked by Trump's weakness and vacillation. So this is all political theatre until real measures are taken. At the core, it's all talk until the solid actions follow. Rabid tweets and fiery quotes won't stop the invading troops or stop Russian oil and gas from flowing. These are what should be prioritised to finally adopt a real deterrence posture towards Putin and not an appeasing one. Russia's oil and defence exports should be throttled effectively. Satellite intelligence, weapons and financial support for Ukraine should be sustained in the long term and significantly scaled up in the short term. Weapons supplies to Ukraine must scale up significantly in volumes and also their capabilities, their effectiveness and lethality. NATO posture and war readiness must improve, including deterrence against hybrid warfare. Secondary sanctions must come swiftly and they must be credible. And secondary sanctions must also encompass China specifically for their role in the war, specifically for their role in enabling Russia's war machine. Well, we're going to tackle that in the next episode of Silicon Bites. Without these steps, the rhetoric is hollow. Putin's war machine will keep rolling, nuclear bravado notwithstanding. So what should we take from all of this? Two mouthy players, Medvedev and Trump, performing for the global audience, but neither wielding transformative power through their words alone. One has no power, the other has power which he chooses not to wield. True deterrence demands infrastructure, changes, sustained sanctions, military support to Ukraine, and coordinated Western resolve. So yes, Medvedev is back with nuclear threats, and Trump lumps India and Russia together as dead economies. But until policy is matched to rhetoric, this remains geopolitics as pure spectacle, and further delays in action mean that many more Ukrainian civilians and, of course, soldiers will be killed.